So the system's loaded up. It has given us a certain number of turns that we weren't able to see of what has occurred between the active shooter and the innocents while we are still en route to the location. We don't have a lot of intelligence at this time. We know that there is a single active shooter that's located somewhere within the school, and we are waiting for additional backup. But we have to establish an initial entry point to allow us to move into, and our primary tasks are to gain situational awareness, gain intelligence, which are kind of one mixed with the other, then identify the threat or threats, neutralize the threat, and then establish tactical command. Yeah. So tactical command will be the endpoint of what we'll do for this segment of the simulation. But at this point, as we've arrived, we have our 2 officers have arrived. They're located with the badge in the upper left. We have 2 of them to stage, and we have to figure out where we want to put them at.
Well, and this is something that came up last time with our pre-test, is our very first question about the firefighters and, you know, what is kind of the most important thing for them, and it's staging. So for us, when we arrive, like we joked, but the first question is like, where do you park? Right. Where do you go? You know, and based on what information you've gotten from dispatch, which is an upcoming feature we're implementing, how would you go about deciding where is the best place to enter, and does the time of day reflect that?
Time of day certainly does, and I'll just so that we cover it, is that we are developing a dispatch system. So you'll be able to integrate and train along a multi-participant dispatch, providing you information from the callers that are on the scene. So that'll give you some of that situational awareness until you actually arrive and make a decision. But minus that, and determining where I'd place, yeah, I've got to make a hard decision. And the first thing I got to think about is, do I stay together or do I cover 2 different entry points with 2 different people?
I know when I've played through by myself, I've tested that. I've gone in by myself and gone in as a pair, and a huge school is difficult to go through one person, especially as I'm sure you're going to show us is what happens when we find the shooter and we're alone.
Right. So there's a lot of things we'll cover as it comes out for that. Now, yeah, based on time of day and based on the simulation for instructors so they understand what it means, and then also based on real-world statistics, the high majority of active shooter incidents at a school occur in the morning, and they occur in the classroom. They start and finish in the classroom area. So without any other intelligence, my first assumption for planning would be is that I need to either be in the west wing or the east wing, because that's majority. Over 80% occur in that area. Sure. So, and I'll tell you this too, if I have to go in by myself, I will. But if I can go in as a pair or as 3 or even as 4 people, I'm reducing my area I've got to scan, which gives me better identification of potential targets faster. I want to reduce that area I have to scan as much as possible. If I have 2 people arriving at the same time, my preference would be to go in as a pair, because we can watch each other's back, which means I'm only covering 180 degrees instead of 360. So for me today, and I could be wrong because I've seen it happen, but what I would do is I'd keep them together, and I'm going to put both of them at this cul-de-sac in between the 2 wings so I can move in as I start to gain additional situational awareness and intelligence. Once I've done that, I click start.
Copy.
It takes a little bit of a minute for it to pop up. All right, so you can see there's my first responding officer. There should be another one over here somewhere. There he is. So over there from, and you can't see the guy that we'll have to talk a little bit about line of sight here in a second, what it means to you. But here's our arriving officers. And you can see through what we have in the simulation right now is you got a little icon here next to the communications panel. If I drop that down, I can see that right now we are talking about the threats in the library.
Right.
Okay, so we made a decision on initial entry that'll get us toward the library, but also we might have seen him if we'd gone in through the front entrance. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce the comms panel, and I do want to show off as a highlight real quickly those LOCs that we talked about previously, LOC 1, LOC 2, which is Tactical Commander, and LOC 3. And this is where I control the individual characters at. This is how I move them around inside the scene as responders. When I go to the Tactical Commander aspect, you'll notice that the camera angle and scope of what I can see changes. And when I go to LOC 3, the Incident Commander view, and again, the scope changes. And that's intentional because if I'm overall in charge of this scene, I have a lot better opportunity to see everything that I'm responsible for, right? I'm just panning around the entire perimeter of the school. I'm responsible for all of this, to
Right.
include, the traffic control plan on the outside. Whereas if I'm the tactical commander, I'm responsible for what is going on inside the school. And if I'm the responder, I'm worried about myself, my teammates, and the threat and the things that are immediately surrounding me. Now, more in those roles and responsibilities as we get into them, but I wanted to make sure that people are aware of that so you can see the scope. So in identification, the first thing I know is the threat's in the library, or was originally seen in the library, and this is the main entrance. This is a secondary entrance, and yet, based on the classroom wings, east and west, I parked over here.
Right.
So my first question would be, and maybe you have the same question, is, where's the library?
Right. You have absolutely no idea. Unless you remembered when you saw it, when you selected your arrival time from the last session that we hosted. But unless you have a map of every single school within your district, you don't really know where you're going or where things are.
So I'm taking an immediate note, because some people might just say, well, gee, Todd, why don't you have something like that to serve inside of your simulation? Well, we kind of do, but we also don't want to give you that automatic assumption you know it, because I think the question would be is, how many responders, how many volunteers know the interior of every structure they're supposed to respond to for as an active shooter incident?
Right.
And I would say that the majority of people, that's a pretty low percentage.
I mean, unless you're a school resource officer, how often do police forces, do training within schools or just do regular visits? I'm sure they have a million other things to do that maybe that isn't necessarily their highest priority.
Right. Or if you're in a rural setting and you only have maybe a couple of deputies and official ambulance EMS that are going to arrive, but you need 50 people to support you, a lot of that's going to be volunteer.
Right.
How often do you get those volunteers together, and how well do they remember the internal structure? So that is something, actually, as the very first lesson learned we will cover when we get into the after-action review post-process is, what can we do to take care of that? Because it is something that even right now responders are struggling with, which is situational awareness to internal structure movement. So we will talk about that. But we'll go back into level of command 1. And we will recenter by hitting the unit cycler at the bottom. Clicking on that will always recenter you on the character you want to control. And from that, we can then go into the ability to control our environment through interacting with things, particularly for inventory capacities. If I were to look at my own individual officer and look at his inventory, I can see that I have on my bulletproof vest. I am carrying a backpack type of individual first aid kit. I have my holstered 9mm. 2 additional pistol magazines, handcuffs. On my vest, I have a tourniquet, and inside of that individual first aid kit, I'm going to call it IFAC from now on, I've got 2 chest seals, I have 2 gauze for hemorrhage control, and I have an additional tourniquet. If I open up the police car and also look at what I might want to have on there to take the time and don protective equipment, this is what I have in the trunk of the car versus in the gun rack. So I would think the first thing I want to do, because I never know when something might come out and attack me, is I want to take the weapons rack M4 and drag that over into my hands to equip it. You'll notice anytime I make a change inside my inventory panel, it is reflected on my character.
Yeah.
Right? But there's other things I probably want also, and I would say a ballistic helmet if available.
Yeah, as much protective gear as we can get, right?
Right. Yep. And I could if I wanted. So you can see here in my custom loadout, I have 3 additional rifle magazines. It would really be dependent upon you, and I'm not going to risk that. Based on them being outside of my vest, I'm not going to do that this time. And then once I'm done, based on that person's available balance, I would shift to the next officer. So let's talk about that again a little bit and why we are a turn-based simulation. In the top part of the screen, what you see is I have action units. Action units equate to the balance of what you can do per turn. So they are based on 10 points equals 1 second, whether that is a tactical individual skill like drawing my weapon or shooting my weapon or making a decision to include moving or opening a door. All of those take points. When I'm out of that balance, I would then move over to the other character. When I'm done with both characters, I end my turn and it starts over again. people ask us, why did you decide to make this action unit based on points and turn based? I want to advocate and remind viewers that we are not your individual tactical judgment, reactionary, and accuracy skill trainer. There are plenty of solutions out there, and I'm actually a big advocate of doing actual training with your weapons on the range or other simulators. We're not about that. What we're doing is consequence management of, if I make a decision, what is the impact of that decision in the next turn? Or I'm thinking about even 10, 20, 30 turns down the road, because I might be impacting something else, like ambulance flow in and out of the scene based on congestion at the initial entry point, just as an example. So we want to slow down the tempo just enough for everyone to understand that there are considerations we make that will have consequences later on. And we believe also that most leaders will like that more than the pressure of making automatic decisions, because you're not allowing people to go through the problem-solving skills. So that is one thing that's in there. Those turns that happened before we got on the ground, 9 turns have already expired. 9 times 5 seconds, that shows you that we responded pretty quick. And this simulation it gave us, we came in 45 seconds after the shooter was called, right? So we know that that's where we're at now. But we will now switch to the other officer and do a similar equipment for him.
So this will be a part that we can cut and paste for.
I am going to move him just a little bit closer to start getting him linked up with our primary responder. Now I don't have any action units really left, and now this is when I would go ahead and click end turn. When I end my turn, you'll see now it goes to the threat as a reaction to anything that he may have seen us do so far, or what is within his own perceptions of what's based on, again, real-world case studies.
Right.
Once his turn is over, it will then go into how the innocents would do a counteraction to his action. And that'll start allowing us to gain immediate intelligence on what might be happening internal. All right, it's come back to us, and now we are able to move forward. We're back to our originally controlling officer, and we've made a decision that we want to be able to establish an initial entry point into one of the classrooms where we're currently located at.
Copy.
And we're going to get him linked up with his partner. I might try to gain initial intelligence by looking in through these windows real quick to see if I see anything out of the ordinary.
Yeah, that's smart. I've never tried that before.
I can see some feet in there, so I at least see that there's somebody inside this first room. It looks like it's short, so I don't know what that really means to me yet, but that's kind of where it's at. And that's done with that turn. One thing to highlight here is that you'll be able to edit your action units. We've kept it intentionally low in your balance of 50 points per turn per character, because you're making very tactical level decisions, which don't take a lot of time, nor should they. But once you get past the initial phase of identifying and neutralizing the threat, a lot of your decisions take longer to make and they take longer to execute.
Right.
So you'll be able to either fast forward to a particular point in the simulation or even edit the balances so that you don't have to do a 50-point turns. You could do 150-point turns, that type of thing. So I'm going to go to my second officer first, because what I want to do is successfully link him up. All right, so I've got 2 officers here that are prepared for entry, and yet we've not done anything to check with dispatch or to make sure that we have additional people responding.
Right.
Now, that might be somewhat arbitrary for departments where everybody automatically responds to an active shooter incident. But if you're in a large location where you've got multiple responsibilities, not everybody can respond, nor should they. You'll get 50 officers arriving and have no plan of how they're going to be integrated, which can be just as bad.
Having too many people is not necessarily better than too little people.
Or at least having them staged correctly so that they can be introduced in a flow that makes sense. Certainly 2 is not enough, but 50 would be just as haphazard.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm communicating in a way that allows us to prepare assets to be arriving when I want them and when I need them, which allows us to go ahead and work a lot of things with incident command and unified command. So I've switched to level of command 2, tactical command. This is where we put in the requesting system of what we feel we're going to need. And this can be updated turn by turn. And so what I'm going to do out of here in the requesting system is I know that any active shooter incident, I'm going to have to worry about taking care of the threat, clearing the rest of the school, establishing a perimeter, establishing traffic control, putting armed escort in with rescue task force, and I'm going to have ambulances. More than likely, at least one person's been injured. So I at least have a knowledge of some type of standard package that I should have right off the bat. So I'm going to request 10 police officers, 2 pump trucks, and 3 ambulances. And I submit that. That took about 5 seconds of coordination with the dispatch to request it. Somebody has to come back and tell me whether or not they would approve that. He's not going to be able to have enough action turns available in this one to probably do that with my second officer. But I can go into the next higher level of command and say, does that request make sense? This is a way for people to start dialoguing with each other about, did you request the right amount of resources? And particularly when you're in the multi-participant mode, anybody can request assets, anybody can approve assets, because there's a dynamic change of leadership as more and more leaders arrive on the scene. And we've seen it many times where a lot of people will come back and give conflicting information and requests. Somebody will say, I only need arbitrarily 10 officers, and somebody else will say, I need 20 ambulances. So the idea is that we can get people to really start establishing dialogue and an approval process based on communication. So from here, as the acting incident commander, whoever be with available points to do it, is that I can approve that, I can modify it, or I can deny it. We don't have a lot of intelligence to drive it, so for right now, I would say I would just approve it. Right, and this is where it goes into multi-turn actions. It's going to take at least another 27 action units in the following turn, so you can pay forward. Let's say it's going to take me 50 and I've only got 20 left. It'll take it from the next turn and leave you with a balance so you can still do something. But at least we know that that's done.
That's one of my favorite features that we've implemented. Because before, if you had, let's say, 23 action units left, but it wasn't enough for what you fully needed, it would just stop and you would be wasting those points. And so now with multi-turn, you still get to kind of take full advantage of every second that you have.
So I am starting to scan to gain more intelligence. I notice that the doors on my side are not opened at all. My initial thought would at least be, if the shooter in my immediate area, doors would be opening and children and faculty members would be in a run, hide, fight training methodology, would be running out past me. They don't know that I'm there yet. They just know that there's a shooter. Since they're not coming towards me, my guess is that they're either hiding and barricading or they found alternate routes of evacuation, which means more than likely the threat is not in my immediate area.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, so it came back to us, and I now have a few action points left over from his turn. I'm going to select the other officer, and I want him to move forward and open the door, and then we're going to move and establish what we call a point of domination on the inside of the door here. By interacting with anything that's highlighted, I can bring it open as a dialog box that allows me to open it, lock it, breach it, or even just check the lock. So if we get into a situation later, we might demonstrate that you can breach. We have mechanical breaching, which is using a sledgehammer, axe, pry bar, or you can do ballistic breaching, which is using your rifle, pistol, or your shotgun in order to get through a door that might be locked that is preventing you from getting after the threat or saving people's lives. Right now, though, we're doing dynamic entry, so I'm going to go ahead and open it. That fog of war now allows me to see what he'd be able to see. Right? We can see that there's nothing really in here. I've got to establish my point of domination on the inside, and then I go to the remaining points available for my other officer, move him to the other side. And we've established an initial entry with a point of domination, and we see we're immediately countering. We're in a breezeway. So,
Nothing exciting.
Nothing
But
exciting.
You never know, right?
You never know. And so at least on that, we know we can start moving a little bit forward to set up again to be able to do it at the other doors. All right, and then we just end the turn.